In spite of her appearance of calm, the hand Judith raised to subdue a strand of chestnut hair trembled. She had known this journey was a mistake, but Lady Forrester had been insistent, and she was not an easy woman to withstand. In a few minutes it would be over, and they could leave. Surely Lady Forrester would allow Judith to stay at her home for a few weeks while the poor relations searched the London agencies for a situation. She listened to the raised voices critically. Her situation had made her expert in judging other people's moods, and it was clear that Lady Antonia was not amused by her aunt's presumption. Judith had had quite enough of being passed around the Forrester family like a parcel of worn clothes. It was time to find a position on merit. Perhaps she would be lucky enough to find an employer who wanted his daughters educated in natural philosophy as well as embroidery and sketching. Lady Forrester abruptly gave up the fight. "Very well, if you won't have Mrs. Winslow, tell her yourself. She's in your sitting room." "What?" Lady Antonia's rich contralto rose to a new level of outrage. "You dragged that poor woman over here and left her where she would hear us brangling? I've known you do some cow-handed things, Aunt Letty, but this is outside of enough. How could you?" The statement was accompanied by the sound of swift footsteps. Judith was already on her feet when Lady Antonia swept into the sitting room, but she was hard-pressed not to gasp. She'd heard that Lady Antonia was beautiful and had taken the evaluation with a grain of salt. Though all heiresses are beautiful by definition, the lady's intemperate language implied a masculine sort of female, but there was nothing in the least bit masculine about the dazzling young woman who appeared. Lady Antonia had a perfection of form and feature that mere money could never have achieved. Above average height, she had a splendid figure and a glowing vitality that illuminated the sitting room. Her most striking feature was a cascade of hair that was neither red nor gold, but a shimmering colour somewhere in between, a molten shade reminiscent of apricots and sunsets. Her wide, direct eyes were a warm brown with cinnamon depths, and her mobile, high-cheek-boned face looked better suited to laughter than tears. Even mourning could not dim her sparkle. Indeed, she looked magnificent in black. With weary resignation, Judith's eyes met Lady Antonia's across the width of the room. In the face of such splendour, Judith drew in on herself, unconsciously raising her chin as she waited to be sent away. She had survived worse than this. It had not been her idea to come, so she had no reason to feel humiliated by her rejection. The moment stretched as the young women's gazes locked and held. Though her aunt had said the proposed companion was young, Antonia was still surprised at the widow's youthfulness. Mrs. Winslow looked scarcely old enough to have been married, much less widowed. She was small-boned and fragile of build, her thick chestnut hair pulled severely back, her fair complexion drained of colour by her mourning blacks. Though her face would have been attractive under other circumstances, today her translucent skin was stark and tight over the delicate bones. Clothing was a mere detail. What struck Antonia was the fine grey eyes that returned Antonia's gaze with bleak bravery. In a flash of insight, Antonia sensed a lifetime of forced patience, of poverty, of hopelessness, the life of an outsider who lives on the sufferance of others. Yet Judith Winslow was not defeated. There was strength and courage in those clear eyes that held her own. Antonia responded to those qualities, wondering if she herself would be equally brave under such circumstances. "I'm sorry you heard that, Mrs. Winslow. You'll have gathered that I find the idea of a companion quite insupportable." The widow lifted her small chin as if bracing for a blow, and her gallantry triggered one of Antonia's impulsive decisions. "I don't need a companion or a slave, but one can always use more friends." She crossed the room and offered her hand. "Shall we see if we can be friends?" The expressive grey eyes registered shock, then a rush of emotion that came perilously near tears. Antonia understood the other woman's struggle for composure. When one is hurting, kindness can be harder to accept than cruelty. Mastering herself, Judith Winslow accepted Antonia's hand. "I should like that very much," she said in a soft, cultured voice. "Very much indeed." Though Antonia did not know it then, the casual, unthinking generosity that was the despair and delight of her intimates had just won her a lifetime's loyalty.